Yo, what's going on, everyone? Mike Hill, the Wholesaling Titan here, and in today's video, I'm answering the question, how do you make a seller take a low offer? So a few times a week, I'll get hit with this question, or maybe I'll see a post online, maybe on Facebook, where someone drops the details of a deal. So they give the after repaired value, repair estimates, and seller's asking price. So maybe they'll say something like, the property's worth $100,000, the repairs are $20K, and the seller wants $80,000. How do I get them to take a lower offer? So before we dive into this, I've had some people reaching out asking about one-on-one calls. Yes, I am still doing the free one-on-one coaching calls. I have a few spots for those every week, but it is on a first-come, first-served basis. You're going to be talking directly to me for about 45 minutes, and I will give you personalized help showing you how to get your next deal done as fast as possible. So I'll put that link in the description below if you want to book a call. So back to getting sellers to take a low offer. There are a few actionable tips, strategies, and specific tactics you can use to help negotiate lower prices. I'm going to run through those step by step in just a moment. But first, I kind of want to start with this big idea. And that is, in these cases, in the vast majority of these cases, actually, the answer to that question, how do you get the seller to take a lower offer, is simply you can't. And as a matter of fact, you probably shouldn't. So here's what I mean when I say that. A lot of people fail to really understand this fundamental concept as a wholesaler. And that is that your job is not to convince a seller to take a low offer. Rather, your job is to understand that there are sellers who are already highly motivated, and your job is to find them and work with them exclusively. You have to understand that seller's motivation, which is most often far more important than most of your, all the different calculations you're doing. And I want to drive this point home with two analogies. So the first is to recognize that your business model as a wholesaler is basically the same as a pawn shop. So a pawn shop is designed to help people who are in need of fast cash. A pawn shop owner does not go out and try to convince people to sell them items at a discount. So, if I could give you an example here, let's say a woman has an engagement ring, it's worth $10,000, and she's in a happy relationship, she's doing well financially. You're not going to convince her to sell you that ring for $6,000. But let's say another woman walks into your pawn shop and she has a $10,000 ring, but she just broke up with her fiance and she has no money for rent and she's about to get evicted from her apartment in the next 3 days. That type of person is far more likely to sell you that engagement ring for $5,000 or $6,000. So these types of situations always are going to be win-win. And that's why, despite the stigma, the misinformation, and a minority of unethical wholesalers out there, this is why you're really providing a massive service. They need us, right? An example would be, a homeowner bought a house for $100,000 10 years ago. They had a good job, paid off half, but then lost their job. Now they owe the bank $50,000. They haven't paid the mortgage in months, and the bank's going to foreclose on the property. So right now, you enter the picture. You come with two options, and the first is that you do nothing. So if you do nothing, what happens? Well, the bank forecloses on the home. The homeowner gets kicked out of their house. The sheriff forbids them from, maybe re-entering the premises. They have no money. They have nothing to show from the house. Their foreclosure is exposed. It's in the public record. They're the talk of neighborhood gossip, and they have a foreclosure on their credit, effectively preventing them from getting any type of loan for another, decade. Now, option number two is that you offer to buy the house. As is, with cash, as soon as possible. You offer to buy the house for $60,000. Now, is that ideal? No, but the owner is already in a bad situation, and this is just making the best out of that situation. So the bank's going to get their $50,000 that they're owed, and they're out of the picture. They're gone. They leave. They leave the homeowner alone. The seller, they get to walk away with, $10,000 to maybe find a place to rent until they're back on their feet. They don't have negative remarks on their credit. There's no social stigma, and they're eligible for a new loan in the future. And then you can offer the deal to a cash buyer for $70,000. The buyer gets a great deal. Remember, the house is worth $100,000, and then you make $10,000. So again, win-win. And just to reiterate, you're not trying to work with everyone. The vast majority of the people you speak to, upwards of 90%, they're not going to be motivated. The number simply will not work. Don't be attached, okay? That's okay. And especially if you're a beginner, you realize you don't need to flip hundreds of houses a month. Most, I'd say, of my new students that come to me, they're making right now about $30,000 to $60,000 a year. So with just one deal done a month, like just one, that's enough to put you in the six-figure income earning bracket. So now let's take a look at my second analogy. Finding wholesale deals is a lot like digging for gold, right? You're inevitably going to dig through and come across and sift through tons of rock and dirt and soil. The majority of what you find is not what you're looking for. But the idea is not to turn rocks and dirt into gold. You're not like some alchemist. It's to realize the gold is there already, it's just kind of hidden. And yes, you need to go through a lot of junk just to get to that, that little nugget, that needle in the haystack. But when you do, it's just so worth it. To a degree, you have to understand this really is very much a numbers game. And while it can be very discouraging to deal with no's and poor prospects, 95% of the time, imagine if I sent you to a room of 100 people and I said, one of them will give you $10,000. All you have to do is ask, would you quit after 10 no's, 20 no's? That's what I see all the time. Now, if there is some motivation, but the numbers, you're just a little bit apart. I mean, you're kind of in the ballpark. Maybe the house needs repairs or the seller wants to move quickly, but you're just not there on the numbers yet. There are some things you can do. So the first thing is going to be effective, transparent, and empathetic communication. So in addition to finding out a seller's motivation to determine if you have a deal, man, just be a human being, right? Understand a lot of these people are going through some tough times. Show some empathy. I mean, some of these situations are really jacked up. Strive to help and offer to help them, even if you can't do a deal with them. And I mean, that's really just the right thing to do. But even business-wise, it'll allow people to kind of drop their guard. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean, just feel more comfortable being honest with you. You're not judgmental. They're seeing if you can really help them. And it also gives you the opportunity to serve them in ways where other wholesalers maybe wouldn't. Maybe you can help them with a moving truck or a service, or negotiate with the end buyer to let them stay for another 30 days. Things like that. My mentor told me a story where very early on in his career, he went and had a meeting with an elderly woman, and he chose not to do the deal because he felt like the price that he needed, it would be taking advantage of her. It would be too low. And later, his mentor told him that another investor, who I guess had a reputation for being kind of ruthless, got the deal at a lower price than my mentor was offering and basically put the lady on the street. So my mentor's mentor told him that if he had done the deal, he could have let her walk with more money, could have helped her move, could have allowed her to stay longer. And he basically did her a massive disservice by not doing the deal. And so that was a mindset shift he had very early on in his career. Also, when you're doing this, it's a great way to build your network. Maybe you refer them to a listing agent who you can later build a relationship with and do business with the agent in the future. In many cases, even if the seller doesn't want to sell to you, they'll give you a referral later on down the line. Maybe they know someone else who wants or needs to sell quickly. And that's one of the reasons why, I've had people tell me that they've received higher offers than mine, but they decided to go with me because they felt I was, honest, authentic, and just felt better about selling to me. Also, as a side note, when I say be transparent, I mean, let them know that you're buying as an investor, you're looking to make a profit, which also partially justifies your need for a lower price. I personally do not, however, tell them how I'm going to be doing my flip. And a lot of people disagree with me on this because they say, well, if you don't tell your seller you're signing your contract, that's unethical. And personally, I don't disclose the information. It's not in any attempt to be sneaky in any way, but simply because it can cause a lot of unnecessary confusion when sellers don't understand what it is that you're doing. And that can just lead to unnecessary problems. So look at it like this, right? If you agree to buy a car for $50,000, should the dealer or should the seller ask you where you're driving afterwards, or how soon you plan on selling it? Is it really their business if you drive that car down the block and sell it to another dealership for $55,000? And so that's my shortened version of this rationale, but I do have a longer, more in-depth video on this topic. So if you're interested, I'll add a link somewhere around here or in the description so you can check it out. So now, while you're actively listening, next thing you want to do is ask a lot of questions. Yes, you are looking for the motivation, but you also want to identify additional obstacles. You want to understand what the seller's thinking. A lot of times they won't tell you the real reason initially, and get them to understand you, while you're simultaneously managing their expectations. So an example is, if you ask a seller how much they want for their property, most often they're probably going to say, well, you called me, right? You give me a number first. And by the way, if you don't know exactly how to respond to that question, then you need to read my Overcoming Objections ebook. Now, it is on sale on my website, but if you join my free Facebook group and shoot me a DM, I will send it to you for free. I'd really love to build up that group, that community, and have a place where we can kind of network, partner, JV, share information. You should be a member of my group, but also of other wholesaling groups as well. Just constantly be networking, and I'm in those groups as well. But one thing I think that is unique is that since at least right now my group is small enough where I look over the vast majority of questions. I make sure there's no misinformation. I answer a lot of those. And on some of the larger channels, and I'm not talking smack here, it's not coming from the owners, but there are other people in there who share answers that are 100% incorrect, right? So join the group and I'll hook you up with that ebook for free. So now that you know how to get them to give you the number first, let's imagine they say, I want $160,000. You keep asking questions to go a level deeper and then a level deeper. So you could say, okay, well, how'd you come up with that number? And they'll say, well, that's what my neighbor's whole house sold for up the block. Okay, and do you know what type of condition that property was in? Which can kind of lead them to kind of questioning their own numbers, question their rationale, while simultaneously creating new perspectives for them and new expectations with regards to the offer they'll be receiving. Which brings me to my next point, which is showing them justification, showing them the numbers, giving them evidence. Now, to be clear, I never start with this. Oftentimes the motivation, effective communication, those are enough to get the deal done. But in those cases where a seller is motivated, looks like there's a deal to be made, but you're just off on the numbers, you guys just aren't quite there yet, you can show them evidence and comps that justify your offer. It's essentially what I call a reverse BPO. So what you're going to do is pull actual comps of similar properties that have sold and show them and kind of highlight the lowest ones. Now, I don't do this as a default practice because, again, oftentimes it isn't necessary, but it's a tool to have in your toolbox to nudge certain types of sellers, maybe like more analytical ones, kind of in the right direction. Also, I don't discourage them from looking at comps or other options, but I'm just not encouraging them to do that because, again, sometimes the more information you give someone, the more difficult it becomes for them to make a decision, or maybe they start second guessing themselves, not feeling good about it. Also, what you want to do, another thing you want to do is inject a sense of urgency. They have to know this offer is not going to be around forever, so they can shop it around for months. And one way I usually accomplish this is by letting them know, look, I'm an investor. We're looking at a few properties right now, and we're definitely going to be buying something, or we're going to be making a decision within, the next week or two. So whatever you decide, either way, please just let me know. And this way you aren't applying that forceful pressure like, hey man, you got to sign right now. But you are, which also makes you look desperate and you kind of lose some of your negotiating leverage. But they do realize that they have to make a decision soon or they risk missing out on a potential solution to their problem. So now that's going to bring us to negotiating. You have to learn how to negotiate. Negotiating is a set of skills you have to learn, but you also have to practice. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with the saying, it takes 10,000, or that statistic takes 10,000 hours to master something. And while I agree with that in the sense that, yes, obviously, you have to put significant time into your craft, if you spend 10,000 hours doing the wrong things, it's not going to necessarily make you better by default. You'll just be maybe a little bit better at doing something the wrong way. So yes, you do have to actually practice, but you also want to be studying negotiating and then going out to the field, practicing and testing your techniques, and then you'll get better and better as you actually do these things. Now, to teach negotiating is beyond the scope of this video, but I can give you some really good pointers on how to get started. Now, this is something, by the way, that I cover extensively in my online course that I work with my group coaching students on, and that I cover and teach extensively as a part of my one-on-one mentorship. If you guys have any questions about any of those programs, I'll go ahead and leave those links in the description for you. But as a quick start right here, some things you can do now. One, I'd recommend going to YouTube and watching clips from the show Pawn Stars. Remember earlier in the video, I mentioned how you're essentially a pawn shop for real estate. And when you watch this show, you're going to see the demeanor with which the shop owners operate. They're not pushy, they're not aggressive, but they're not desperate. People are coming to see them, and you can see the power dynamics as well as some specific skills. So for example, they're never going to give a price first. So watch how they do that and take notes. They're going to stick to their guns. They'll explain that they need to make a profit. And most importantly, they're never afraid to walk away if the deal doesn't work for them. They'll just say, hey, I'm sorry, it doesn't work for us. Best of luck to you. That's it. And just by watching these interactions, you can actually pick up some really, really good stuff. So highly, highly recommend you do that. Earlier, I said that you should check my Overcoming Objections ebook. That's written specifically for wholesaling. So that gives you a framework for dealing with any type of objection, but I also give you the word for word scripts on how to respond to the 13 most common objections you'll face as a wholesaler. Again, join my free Facebook group and shoot me a DM. I'll send that to you for free, so you don't have to buy it. And next, of all the different courses, the books, the videos, and resources out there on negotiating, I think the best and the most powerful tool, and I make all my students read this, by the way, is a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, who was the FBI's top hostage negotiator for decades. So much of what he teaches is very much counterintuitive to what most of us have been taught about negotiating. Because as a hostage negotiator, he had to essentially get all of his terms met, meaning, many of us are taught, for example, like to meet in the middle on deals. So let's say, for example, I want to buy a property for $50,000 and the seller wants $100,000. We're taught to kind of meet them in the middle at $75,000. Now, Chris in his book gives the example, if he has 4 hostages in a bank, he can't say, all right, send 2 out and then keep the other 2 or kill the other 2. So he really teaches you to go about negotiating in a way that's very different from what at least I used to hear, I've heard previously, and to almost always get your way. So I highly, highly recommend that you read that. Really good tactics. And so moving right along, the next most important thing that you want to do is make sure you always follow up. The vast majority of your deals will not be made on the first contact, and that really works to your advantage. I think 48% of wholesalers never follow up after making that initial contact, and that's crazy considering that the majority of your deals, like as high as 80%, those are going to be made between your 5th and 12th point of contact. Because sometimes, a seller's just not ready to sell or not ready to sell at the price that works for you. Or, maybe they don't need to sell because the situation maybe has not become dire or unbearably frustrating yet. So just be sure that you're always following up. So as a recap, the biggest takeaway from this video is to remember that in most cases, you simply can't get a seller to take a low offer if they are not sufficiently motivated, and you shouldn't try. You're not trying to work with everyone. You are looking for gold, not trying to turn rocks and all that stuff into gold. So keep in mind that concept of you being, kind of the pawn shop model, and make sure that you are, you're not trying to make people take low offers. You're realizing there already exists a sub-segment of the population that needs to sell the property at the price that you want. And so it's more a game of like hide and seek as opposed to trying to, convince people in the majority of cases. Now, when you do find some motivation, we talked about some of those tactics that you can use. So I would love to hear you guys' feedback on that stuff. If you guys have questions on it, please do leave them down in the comment section below. Check out the links. You want to book your one-on-one call. Again, those spots first come, first serve, but they are a free call. I'll show you exactly how to get your first or next deal done as fast as possible. Again, it's kind of my specialty, especially, if you haven't done a deal before. I find so many people come to me with just so much information and they just don't know where to go. They're consuming tons of content, and content's not bad, right? It's a good thing to always be self-educating, but then this guy said this and this one said this, and which one should I do? They're bouncing all over the place. In a lot of cases, I teach people how to actually do less. I say, hey man, leave that stuff alone. This is what you should be doing. So again, feel free to jump on a one-on-one call. I love doing those. Happy to talk to you guys. Also, make sure you join my free Facebook group. You can communicate with me there, leave me questions there, and shoot me that DM. I'll send you over my Overcoming Objections ebook for free. Other than that, thank you guys again for joining. Always a pleasure. Please do like, comment, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel out a great deal. There's also a link that I'll put in the description where you guys can submit questions that you would like me to answer on future videos. I'm always looking for topics to cover. So you guys are struggling, whether it's a specific issue, specific deal, or a bigger concept, or looking for resources, whatever it is, man, I'm here to help. So leave me your questions, comments below. Thanks again for joining me, and I will talk to you guys soon. Stay blessed. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.